Buster, how you doing?
I'm doing great, Michael. How are you?
Good. Now, I want to give you the question that I essentially opened the show with. All right? If you're the Yankees, would you have rather signed Juan Soto and not have Max Fried and Cody Bellinger, or would you have rather not signed him and have Max Fried as your number one starter? Because if Soto came back, you might not have Williams, you wouldn't have Bellinger, and you certainly wouldn't have Max Fried, which means that if everything happened the way it happened, Carlos Rodon would be your number one starter. I'm just talking about 2025. Are the Yankees better off that they brought in Fried than to have Soto?
It's a great and interesting way of looking at it, and you know this, as they were going down the wire in the Soto negotiations, there were definitely people in the Yankees organization when you're talking about, an average annual salary of getting up to $50 million, you're like, we love the player, but we don't have to go down this route.
Right.
For the exact reason that you just laid out. So you invest a lot of money in Soto after having a lot of money invested in Judge, but would the team be better off having more depth? I think the answer to your question is apparent. You have to have Max Fried now. You can look at the Yankees roster and say, man, if with Max Fried, could this team, make the playoffs without Soto, but without Garrett Cole, without Fried, does this team make the playoffs? I don't think so.
Now,
especially in a really competitive American League East.
So when the word came down yesterday that Cole is out, might be out for a year and a half. He might not be back till the All-Star game next year. I would think, I said it on the air too before it became official, that, I thought the Yankees were the best team in baseball. Now it's not that clear cut. But what I find fascinating is that the odds in Vegas didn't move at all. I mean, minuscule amount of movement. Wow. They still think the Yankees are the favorite to get to the World Series out of the American League. Do you feel that way?
No, I thought, early in the offseason when the Red Sox traded for Garrett Crochet, when they signed Walker Buehler, even before they signed Alex Bregman, I thought that they had become the team to beat in the American League East, and I'm going to pick them to win the American League this year. I think they're that much improved. And look, I don't think this is a case where, the Yankees are done and they can't possibly win without Garrett Cole. We saw last year how they could survive with internal solutions, and I do expect before the trade deadline that there'll be some options that'll emerge to help their rotation. But I think the Red Sox are a better team right now. And what is generally speaking, and I think you'd agree with me here, is a weaker American League.
Yeah.
If you think of the best teams in baseball, the top 3-4 teams are all in the National League.
So do you have any concern? Do you think the Orioles could win the division?
No, I don't.
Because of pitching?
That's exactly right. I mean, the Orioles, despite the fact that they're in their window to win with all these young players having graduated the major leagues, with Adley Rutschman, Gunnar Henderson established, I think it surprised a lot of people in the wintertime that they didn't do more in terms of bolstering the rotation, and they left themselves in a fragile state going into spring training that Grayson Rodriguez had to be their ace. And then what happened last week, his fastball velo was down 89. They shut him down for 7 to 10 days, and they're expressing optimism that he's going to be able to come back and pitch. But and I know, you just don't know with these situations. It's an incredibly thin rotation. I know from talking to Brandon Hyde, the Orioles manager last week, he felt like despite the fact that they struggled in the second half, they still won 91 games. And that they're a really good team. But I just think the rotation is so thin and has such a lack of depth behind it. Any more injuries, and you wonder if they're going to be able to make the playoffs.
Let's talk about the insurance the Yankees have on Cole. How much of the $36 million will they not have to pay?
So I don't know the answer to that, the precise answer to that. Typically, they have insurance on his contract, and typically it's about 3/4. So if those numbers are right, then it would be about $27 million that they'll recoup, but that doesn't affect their luxury tax situation. Having Cole go on the injured list, they still, if they make additions going forward, it's $1 tax for every dollar they spend, whether it's a free agent, like a Cal Gibson if they wanted to go that route, or if they trade for a player during the course of the year.
Now, I also wanted to know this. I've asked a couple of people, and I said, well, Buster would definitely know this. So during the offseason, as was his right, Garrett Cole opted out.
Yep.
To get that guaranteed 10th year. Brian Cashman called his bluff and said, no, we're not giving it to you. So essentially, he was a free agent. And the next day, he opted back in. Could the Yankees have just let him go away?
100%. And given what happened last spring with the elbow injury, knowing that the biggest indicator of an injury to come are past injuries, you could have made a case at that point that would have been the smart thing for the Yankees to do. It would have been a reasonable argument that sometime in the last years of Garrett's career that he was going to blow out, that he was going to wind up missing a year and a half. I got to be honest, when Garrett or Scott Boras, and I think it was Garrett who directly called Hal Steinbrenner and said, "Hey, let's just do the same deal we had before." I thought for sure that the Yankees would just move on and say, "Look, we have other concerns. You're talking about a pitcher in his late 30s, knowing that there's issue with the elbow." I think absolutely there could have been a strong case to just let him go.
It's interesting, though. So they probably erred on the side of being loyal because he's been such a great Yankee.
Yep.
He loves the Yankee experience, but probably the cutthroat business move would have been to say, okay, you opted out, you're out. And that's what a lot of the front office wanted to do when Alex opted out. And they ended up re-signing him. But I guess they wouldn't know that he was going to blow out. But the thing I always wonder about, Buster, last year with the edema and the inflammation in the elbow, and then he didn't pitch for half the season, came back and actually pitched quite well and great in the postseason. But they didn't tell us why he had the inflammation, why he had the edema. Something had it, but supposedly they ran tests during the winter and they felt good about where his elbow was. So I don't know what I would have done because it would have been a cutthroat move for sure.
Yeah, well, and in response to a cutthroat move to opt out of the contract, which is why, from pure business standpoint, it would have been, I think, probably the right call to walk away at that point. I really don't mean that as a second guess.
Right.
But you laid it out perfectly. I once had a general manager say to me, he laughed and he said, "Hey, when we tell you guys that it's inflammation, we're not telling you anything. The real question is, where's the inflammation coming from?"
Yep.
And the Yankees knew after what happened last spring that there was a reasonable chance at some point that Garrett Cole was going to blow out. There was concern it was going to happen after he came back at midseason. Now, they lived through the Masahiro Tanaka situation where, he had a partial tear in the elbow ligament. Essentially at that point, he had a ticking time bomb in his elbow. And guess what? It never went off. And so you don't know how these things are going to play out. In Garrett Cole's case, it went off. Yeah, I agree with you that there would have been I think there would have been many teams that would have told Garrett Cole, okay, you chose to opt out. We're going to take the $144 million and go spend it on something else.
And the reason why Garrett didn't, I think he loves being a Yankee, but he also knew that elbow's a ticking time bomb. If he was going to sign with anybody else, they were going to run extensive tests, and whatever team was thinking about signing him, they were going to see that too. But he gave the Yankees an opening by opting out.
Yeah, and it surprised me that there wasn't an understanding before the opt-out, because you know how it goes. This is what happened with CC Sabathia in his case, where his agent, Brian Peters, was threatening to opt out. They were doing negotiating behind the scenes, but before he opted out, they wound up agreeing to this an extension, and this was after they had found a tear in his shoulder capsule. And in the end, he wound up working out a deal to come back, but he never actually opted out of the contract. It surprised me that Garrett, first off, he opted out without knowing how it was going to turn out at the back end, and it surprised me the Yankees let him back in.
All right,
but, I agree with you. It's about Garrett has been a great pitcher for them. He's been a great teammate. He loves playing for the Yankees. I was just surprised that, he walked out the door and they let him back in.
All right, let me ask you about what's available now. Can they do anything? Because, you look at it, Carlos Rodon's their second starter. Marcus Stroman or Clark Schmidt are 3 and 4, and you don't even know who 5 is going to be. Could be Carrasco, could be Warren. They obviously need another starter. I don't know if they need it right away, but is there anything available now?
So you could go into the marketplace. Kyle Gibson, as I mentioned, he's a journeyman. He's gone from the Orioles to the Cardinals the last couple of years. that could be someone that you could talk to. Lance Lynn is another guy who's out there who's been with the Yankees before. You've seen his home run numbers go up. And just knowing Brian Cashman, how he handles these situations, he's learned that you don't have to panic. That 162 games is a long time. They did that last year with Heel. They didn't know exactly what he was going to bring to the table, and it turned out to be great.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's what they'll do at the beginning of the year, and then as the season goes on, yeah, there are going to be names available. Look, you could call the Marlins right now and ask about what it would cost to get Sandy Alcantara, who won the Cy Young Award in 2022, blew out his elbow. He's come back. He looks absolutely great. But here's the thing. He's got a very team-friendly contract for a couple more years. It would cost the Yankees so much, and they might not even have enough. Last year, when Garrett Crochet was out on the market, the Yankees wanted to make a deal with the White Sox, and the White Sox basically told them, you don't have enough in your farm system. We're not interested. As you know, their farm system has declined in the last couple of years. And so if there's a competitive situation to bid for somebody like Alcantara, I think they would be at a disadvantage. The better option probably for the Yankees as the season goes along is as teams drop out of contention and they become sellers, that's when names become available. The Blue Jays, for example, if they don't wind up contending and they wind up being sellers during the course of the year, they got Chris Bassett, they got Max Scherzer. The Padres drop out, you got Michael King. Dylan Cease is out there, has been out there to some degree. But I think right now there's not a lot out there in terms of veteran starters.
Do you have any word whatsoever on Stanton? It's so mysterious. He's had the third PRP. There's word that he's going to have more. I mean, do you think we're going to see Stanton this year?
I do. From what I understand so far, their feeling is that through treatment that he's going to be able to come back now. Is that July?
Mm-hmm.
Is it August? Is sometime? I don't think they have a specific time frame until they see how, he responds to treatment. It was interesting to hear from him the other day where he was, let everybody know, look, if this doesn't work out, he needs surgery, he could be out for the year. I do think the Yankees are monitoring, the market for hitters. A guy like J.D. Martinez, you wonder if he would be a fit. He probably is going to want more money than the Yankees would be willing to offer. I think that will be a telltale as to whether or not the Yankees think Stanton is coming back if they go out and make a move for a veteran hitter in the next few weeks.
Do you? We're talking with Buster Only here on the Michael K. Show. Do you have any idea what the Astros wanted from the Yankees in the Kyle Tucker trade? I mean, I've heard Heel. Who else did they ask for? And did they feel that the Yankees had anything to satisfy them, or they were always content with what the Cubs gave them?
So I don't know exactly the back end of the trade. In other words, who would have rounded out the trade? It was Heel and others. I think, and we've seen the situation happen through the years, where there's a perception in the Yankees organization that, you know what, the cost to us is going to be higher than somebody else for whatever reason. And this is pure speculation on my part. I got to believe that given the tension between the two franchises over the last 5 or 6 years, it would have been difficult for the Yankees to get Kyle Tucker from the Astros. There's just so much anger and so much resentment over the sign-stealing stuff and comments that Brian's made, and the Astros have fired back at times. I just don't think those teams would have ever worked out a deal for Kyle Tucker.
Buster, we appreciate you coming on as always. We'll talk to you soon, all right?
Okay, Michael, thank you.
All right, that's Buster Only. Interesting stuff from him.